And welcome into the Thursday edition. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get it all. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Robbie Stanley, alongside the youngins, Jake Lyman, Connor Newt in the house today. Jacob, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Yeah, we got me and Mr. Newt today after we've kind of tag teamed the last couple days. So should be a fun show.
Really just energizing having you both in here. The youthful energy that you bring. Usually I'm dealing with somebody who's a grown man suffering from gout.
Right.
So quite the turnaround here.
We do bring a significantly less amount of gout to the show.
There's no question about that. Connor Newt, how we doing? 2 days in a row. You in here at 6 o'clock?
Yeah, it's energizing, to say the least.
Remember, Jake, when I was telling you about how the week went on a couple weeks ago, Connor Newt I thought was dead. We're getting that vibe again this morning.
Yeah.
He's struggling a little bit.
He says he's bringing the energy, but we're going to need you to show us a little bit more, Connor Newt.
Ask me again at like 8 a.m. I'll be better.
I'll ask you at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
We got a lot to get to on the program here today. We'll have the best and worst things in sports coming up later this hour at 6:45. Bill Bender from Sporting News will be with us at 7 o'clock. We'll get into some college football with him. Alex Daugherty from the Tennessean, who covers the Predators, at 7:30. And the Rob rant coming up later in the show as well. We'll take your thoughts. In the meantime, 615-737-1025, our phone number. Jake, your quick thoughts on the NBA draft last night. You'll be stunned to know that Cooper Flagg was the first overall pick by the Dallas Mavericks. So we knew that was going to be the case in the aftermath of the Dallas Mavericks making just a stunning trade in the middle of the regular season, sending Luka Doncic to the LA Lakers, and then winning the NBA draft lottery, which sparked a lot of conversation around here. But Cooper Flagg officially now a Dallas Maverick. Dylan Harper going number 2 overall to the San Antonio Spurs. But all in all, I did not spend a whole lot of time watching the NBA draft last night. I saw Cooper Flagg get drafted. I saw Dylan Harper get drafted. And frankly, much past that, I did not care last night.
I think I watched the first 10 picks. I'm a medium Phoenix Suns fan. I don't follow closely enough to really care all that much, but I watched until they made their pick. They got Malawach from Duke, which I'll take it. I knew who he was, so that's a start in the NBA draft.
That is.
It wasn't, there wasn't too much that was shocking last night. I think Ace Bailey going 5 was probably the biggest change from what was being projected, and he was kind of all over the place, not taking workouts with any teams, and the Jazz ended up taking him one spot in front of the Wizards. So, it's the NBA draft. You get outside of the top 4 or 5, and a lot of those guys probably aren't going to make much of an impact on the NBA. But Cooper Flagg makes the Mavericks at least somewhat contenders in the West, and Dylan Harper adds another young piece to the Spurs. I think that's probably the extent of who's going to make an immediate impact for some of these teams.
The one thing I'll say about the NBA draft, which is so much different than basically every other sport, is you better wait a hot second before you put that hat on when you get drafted. Because the NBA draft, more so than any other one, you get drafted in a certain spot and then you're like immediately traded. It happens all the time. And it happened several times last night.
Well, I heard this on the way in, and I do agree that the NBA needs to start just announce the trades. I understand.
Yes.
Like the league year doesn't start until July 6th or something like that. But having these players go up and wear the hat of a team who they are clearly not playing for is the stupidest thing ever. It's like,
what's that photo of, like, wasn't it Kobe?
He
got Charlotte, there's like a Charlotte Hornets hat or something like that, and everybody knew he wasn't going there.
And that was, 25 years ago? More than that? And they still haven't changed this.
Yeah.
Like Malawach is the example. Everybody knew that pick was traded in the Kevin Durant trade earlier this week, but he goes up there and puts a Rockets hat on. It's the stupidest thing ever. Let these guys have their moment where they're actually wearing the hat of the team they are going to go play for. The NFL's figured it out with all the draft day trades, and I get that's after their league year has officially started, but the NBA can do this. It's all semantics. I guess something could fall through and maybe somebody fails a physical and you have to take it back. But for the most part, just let the players wear the hat of the team they are actually going to play for.
Yeah, Kobe drafted by Charlotte in '96 and traded to the Lakers for Vlade Divac. So good
Wow.
move by the Lakers.
Yeah.
Worked out pretty well.
One of the greatest trades of all time.
Worked out very nicely for LA there. So congratulations to those drafted in the NBA draft last night. For some reason, the NBA has decided that this now needs to be a 2-day thing when you have 2 rounds in the NBA. So day 2 of the NBA draft coming up today. So congratulations to that.
I mean, I could not understand less why this needs to be a 2-day
I have
event.
no clue.
We talked about it earlier this week off the air that last year it made sense with the whole Bronny thing of people are going to tune in to see where LeBron James' son goes.
Yeah.
Tonight,
I have no reason to tune in.
we could play a game of NBA draft prospect or random name, and I couldn't tell you who any of these players getting drafted tonight are.
Yeah.
So I will not be tuning in tonight. I don't really understand why they made it a 2-night event. The NFL, it makes sense.
Yes.
You know, you've
the NFL draft, they figured it out.
everybody's going to
very
tune
good.
in day 1.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to tune in day 2, and then day 3, it's something to have on in the background.
And it goes by very quickly in day 3. Yeah.
But
it's
the NBA second round, I don't even really care to have that on in the background because most of these players probably won't even make the team. They're going to end up being G League guys or playing in Europe. So I don't understand it, but I guess the NBA, they've got people smarter than me who are making these decisions.
I'm not sure that they do. They're making a lot of dumb decisions lately, but we'll see how that works out for the NBA. Scott Wheeler was on with DVD yesterday. We're going to play some of his comments coming up here in just a few minutes, but I do want to touch on his last and latest mock draft for the Athletic, as the Predators are now 1 day away from the NHL draft. And it's interesting. I mean, you'll be hard-pressed at this point to find a mock draft anywhere out there that does not include Matthew Schaefer going 1 to the Islanders and Michael Misa going 2 to the Sharks. You'll probably find some, but usually that's trying to either manufacture some trade or trying to be different. That's basically, I would be stunned at this point if it's not Schaefer at number 1 and Misa at number 2, but we'll see. Wheeler in the latest mock draft has the Predators selecting Porter Martone at number 5, who is the winger that we spent a lot of yesterday discussing, and James Hagens falling all the way to number 7, being selected by the Boston Bruins. So he's got Brady Martin. I combined 2 draft prospects there. Brady Martin being selected at number 6 by the Philadelphia Flyers. So Hagens dropping all the way to 7. There's a lot of discussion out there about Hagens right now and what's real and what's not real in terms of people expecting him to drop. There were some more reports / rumors put out there yesterday of, man, I'm hearing that James Hagens, he might fall a little bit more than people think he would in this draft. And this is similar to the NFL draft, just in terms of when you get this close to it, what is actually real and what is not real. I don't know. I'll tell you this. If it's the Predators, in my opinion, and they've got both Porter Martone and James Hagens sitting there at number 5, that's a pretty good spot for Barry Trotz to be in at that point. Look, I've said it. They're gonna come away with a good player here at number 5. There are different styles that a lot of these guys and a lot of these centermen bring to the table here. Martone is not a centerman, but he can end up being, I think, a pretty good player in the NHL. But if the Predators are having to choose between James Hagens and Porter Martone at number 5, I'd probably sign up for that right now if I'm a Predators fan.
I think a lot of Predators fans would sign up for that. I mean, you've got 2 really good players, and I understand the feeling that you have to kind of take a center when you're this high because you've been searching for that elite centerman pretty much since the inception of the franchise. But it's when you're picking number 5, it should be best player available, especially in a sport like hockey where it's not like this guy's going to come in and be your second line center right away. You're building, and I know this was a large topic with Jared yesterday, but you are building for the future with this pick. It doesn't have to fill a hole right now. You should take the player that you think is going to be the best NHL player for you, regardless of position. Hagens, I think, would be a great pick at 5, but if Barry Trotz really loves Porter Martone, and I know I saw I think it was in Wheeler's mock draft, that they spent a lot of time watching Porter Martone.
Yes.
And sent a lot of executives up there to watch him. Then if that's your guy, that's your guy. And you shouldn't pass on him just because he doesn't play center.
I'm not sure how much this matters in the discussion. I don't think it really should matter all that much at all. I do think, like, Martone, if they picked him, he would have a chance to play pretty early. Like, there's a reason that Porter Martone just played in the Men's World Championship with Canada. Like, he's solidly built.
Yep.
Physically, he's probably NHL ready. Like, he's got, I think he's listed at 6'3", 204 pounds. So, like, he's got some good size to him already. That doesn't guarantee that he's, like, immediately ready to play in the NHL. But I do think, just from a physical makeup standpoint, he's certainly probably more ready than Higgins is at that point. Again, I don't think you can draft that way. Like, you don't draft Porter Martone because he's maybe ready to play quicker than James Higgins is. What you're doing here is you're trying to project long-term who's going to end up being the better player. That's ultimately what matters here. But if they did take Martone, then I would at least think that there's a shot that he could start with them this year. Higgins, I don't think so. I think Higgins is probably going back to college, if I had to guess.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. I think you don't make that part of your decision-making process of who's going to be ready faster, because if Porter Martone, and I'm not saying that he's this type of player, but if he is a 6-year third-line winger, but he plays immediately, I would rather take Higgins, who, maybe you have to have him cook a little bit longer.
Yep.
But he ends up being your top line center for 10 years. I'd much rather have that, even if you have to wait 3 extra years to get him there.
I thought it was really interesting having Scott Wheeler on our station yesterday. He joined DVD and kind of broke down a little bit of the Martone and Higgins conversation, which is a lot of what you see right now in these mock drafts as it relates to the Predators. We'll get into that coming up next. Take your thoughts on the Predators and the NHL draft. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, the game. Join us tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena for a party like no other and celebrate the future of Smashville at the Nashville Predators 2025 NHL Draft Party. More details at theGameNashville.com/events. Catch 102.5 The Game's Draft Night in Smashville tomorrow starting at 6 o'clock. I'll be doing that alongside Max Hers, and we will have different guests joining us throughout the night, including, hopefully, the number 5 overall pick. So looking forward to that coming up tomorrow night. Powered by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 429. So we will get started at 6 o'clock tomorrow, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. Even beyond the NHL draft, trades still going in the NHL, and there are some GMs out there that have said publicly that they expect more trades to happen over the course of the next couple of days. Could be pretty busy in the NHL. So we'll see, number one, if the Predators get involved in any of that. And number two, what happens on the draft front. Last night, J.J. Peterka getting traded from the Sabres to the Utah Mammoth. So some top 6 caliber players on the move, and we'll see what more Utah does. Utah picking in front of Nashville at number 4 after their spot in the draft lottery. So we'll see what all happens on that front. I have one texter that says, you get Hagens all day. Did you see the Peterka trade? Wingers can get picked up for next to nothing. Centers can't. And I do think a lot of Predators fans feel that way. And Jake, we talked about that a couple of days ago of just the plight of Predators fans having not ever had that centerman, and how if it is Martone, like if the Predators take Martone, I think he can end up being a really good player for them. In the immediate aftermath of it, there are going to be some Predators fans that are very upset if that's the way they go.
Yeah, and you're still in the same situation you are right now, which is still looking for that center. And who knows the next time you'll pick in the top 5. You hope you're probably not picking the top 5 next year after Barry Trott's comments yesterday on Tuesday of that he's focused on this upcoming season. He wants to be competitive. So if this is your only chance to get into the top 5 and take a center who you think could be your top line center for a long time, you probably do have to take that.
So Scott Wheeler from The Athletic, who was their NHL prospect / draft guru, was on with DVD yesterday. And he said a lot of really interesting things. If you missed that interview, I'd encourage you to go back and check it out. But a lot of the interview also focused in on Porter Martone, James Hagens, the idea of taking a winger or a centerman. And I just thought it was a really fascinating conversation. Here was some of what Scott Wheeler had to say on DVD yesterday.
Drafting as high as they are now is an opportunity to add a sort of truly, truly high-end player. There are a few there that I think they would consider. I think they should and will consider James Hagens out of Boston College, a high-end, high-skill centerman who would project potentially to be a first-line center for them someday, and certainly should be a top 6 player for them someday if they were to take him at number 5. But I've kept coming back, despite the quote-unquote perceived need within the Predators organization for a centerman. I kept coming back to Martone. I kept hearing Martone. He would add a little bit more size to their group. They do have some depth at the center ice position that's coming. Igor Surin was their first-round pick a year ago. Everybody was introduced to Fyodor Svechkov this year with the NHL roster a little bit. So they do have some young players coming down the middle. Obviously, they have sort of good depth on the wing as well, whether that's James Hagens' Boston College teammate, Teddy Stiga, or Matthew Wood, who everybody has been introduced to now a little bit. But they've got good depth within the pool, good depth within the organization. There should be waves of young talent on the way, Tanner Molendyke on the blue line, etc. But Martone would give them their top prospect, and it wouldn't even be close, frankly. And I'm a big, big believer in Tanner Molendyke, but just a true cut above that. So would James Hagens, for that matter. But Martone is the name that I've heard linked to them more often than Hagens in the last few weeks here.
So I thought that was really interesting from Scott Wheeler, and he talked about that on DVD yesterday. He wrote something similar in his latest mock draft at The Athletic about Martone. And he even said at one point yesterday, Jake, that if it was up to him, he'd probably take Hagens, and that'd probably be the way he'd go if he were the Predators. But he just keeps hearing Martone being connected to the Predators. And, you know, he talked about kind of that top of the lineup forward prospect that they've just not really had a whole lot of throughout the history of their organization. Look, I totally agree with him that if it's Martone, if it's Higgins, if it's Denoye, if it's Frondell, whoever it ends up being at number 5, that player is immediately going to be their top prospect. So there's that part of it. Now, there are different levels to it in terms of who they pick, but I just found that fascinating that Scott Wheeler has been really hearing Porter Martone's name connected to the Nashville Predators over the last few weeks.
And you wonder if it's a smokescreen because, as we said, not to the extent of the NFL, but there is some positioning to be had there of these teams trying to see if they can get somebody to slip to them. Maybe the Preds do want James Higgins and are trying to put it out there that they want Porter Martone. So who knows? And maybe the Preds believe that Higgins is going to be gone before they come on the clock. But you mentioned those 4 names, Frondell, Denoye, Martone, Higgins. 2 of those 4 are pretty much guaranteed to be there at number 5.
Yep.
So you're going to have a choice of a couple of really good players. And like Scott Wheeler just said, whoever it is likely to become your top prospect right away. I get that Preds fans are going to want one player over the other. It feels like Higgins is the guy that most Preds fans have their sights set on. But no matter what, you're going to get a guy who this team feels like can be a top line forward for you for a very long time.
Yes, and I look at their prospect pool right now, and Wheeler's not wrong. Like, they do have some centermen coming, and the question is, how good are they, right? Like, Svechkov got in the NHL a lot quicker than I think most of us thought.
Yep.
And Barry Trotz said it again the other day, like, quicker than he probably hoped that he would last year, and he was fine. Like, I thought he got better as the year went on. You could tell that he was becoming more and more comfortable as the regular season ended. And I think he's probably going to start and play in Nashville next year. And then the question really becomes with a guy like Svechkov is, all right, I think we can see that he's going to be good enough to be an NHL player. How good of an NHL player? Yeah. Because like it's a big difference between, hey man, he could be a really good, shut down third line center for them for 6 or 7 years, as opposed to a top 6 player who you're counting on to put up 50 or 60 points every year. I mean, those are 2 different things. So what is Svechkov there? I know that they are really excited about their first round pick from a year ago, Igor Surin. He had a good year in the KHL. He is a driver of offense over there. He's still only 18. Like, he doesn't turn 19 until August the 1st. So he's probably still a few years away. But I know that they took him 22nd overall last year. I know that they're excited about what he can be. But again, even with him, how good? Are we talking first line center? Are we talking second line center? Because like they do have some centermen coming up through their pipeline here. But how good are they? That's going to be the question here. And I don't know what the answer is. It's hard to pinpoint exactly how good Igor Surin is going to be when he's 18 years old, and right now he's playing in Russia. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what that looks like over here. But I'm with Wheeler on they've got some center prospects in the cupboard, but you can never have enough high-end guys, especially at that position.
Exactly. It's just way too early to know what Svechkov and Surin are going to be. You hope that those guys can both be top 6 players moving forward, but Svechkov really just got a taste of the NHL last year, and I think this will be a big year for him in terms of finding out a little bit more about what he's going to be. And then Surin, like you mentioned, he's 18 years old. You can't project what he's going to be. You really hope that the potential that he has, it turns him into a top line, second line.
I can tell
center.
you they love him. They
Right.
love that guy. They think he's going to be really good.
But he's years away.
Yeah.
And you're right. The more throws you get at the dartboard, the better when it comes to the center position. And it'd be great if Surin turns out to be a great player and you get a guy like Higgins. And then you've got 2 really good centers moving forward, which in order to compete for a Stanley Cup, you need a couple of those guys.
Yep.
So I think, like we were saying earlier, I don't know if position should impact the decision here. I think you take the best player on your board if you're Barry Trotz and don't force it just because you have been looking for that center for a long time. But I can also understand Preds fans that might be upset if they do take a guy like Porter Martone and pass up on a guy who could end up being an elite centerman.
What do you want to see the Predators do at number 5 overall tomorrow? We'll take your thoughts on that. Some more of your thoughts to get to already on the text line as well. Driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. More coming up next. We'll have the best and worst things in sports coming up at 6:45. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby and Rexrode brought to you by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get it all. Robbie Stanley, Jake Lyman, Connor Newt here with you on this Thursday morning. We'll have the best and worst things in sports coming up at 6:45. Bill Bender from Sporting News will be with us at 7 o'clock. We'll get into some college football with him. So looking forward to that. Taking your thoughts right now on the Preds, 615-737-1025. Let's head to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Ryan in Mount Juliet. Ryan, good morning, buddy. Thanks for calling in.
Morning, guys. Haggins needs to be the guy. If he's there, they need to take. You don't get many guys that are compared to a player like Jack Hughes from NHL Scouts that just pop up on trees every year. They've always said that the top line center is what drives the team to a Stanley Cup, and that is what Hagens could be. I've been on the Hagens train since, mid-January when the Preds aren't going to do anything. It needs to be him. I know Porter Martel is a good scorer, physical and all that, but, the Preds have drafted guys like that for years, and they have never gotten the center. Hagens could be the center for this team to drive them to a cup. And Svechkov has the potential to be a second-line center for this team, which I think Trotz is right to put him there this year.
Actually, call Ryan. Appreciate it. Well, I would say a couple things to that. They have drafted certainly a lot of wingers in the past. They have drafted some very good wingers. Now, they did not draft Philip Forsberg. They traded for Philip Forsberg very early in his career. And for all intents and purposes, he has come up through this organization, but he was not drafted by them. They have not drafted a winger with the profile of Porter Martone. They just haven't. Hartnell was a really good one. He ended up being a good player. Fiala has been a good winger in the NHL for sure. One of their best picks they've ever made was a really good winger by the name of Patrick Hornquist, who was the last pick in the entire draft and ended up having a great career. So they've had some, to that point, more success drafting wingers than they have centermen. There's no question about that. I guess what you've really got to boil it down to, and Trotz said this the other day, which I think we have to remember in that conversation. He outright said with Jared that his preference would be to draft a centerman. So I don't think that's just lip service. I understand that this time of year, you got to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt when it comes to how willing these general managers are going to be to discuss their strategy with the draft. So that you have to keep that in mind in the background of this. But this is not a new conversation with Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz, from the moment he took this job, has been talking about trying to find a centerman. So my guess is if there are two players and one of them's Martone and another one's a centerman, be it Hagens or anybody else, and the Predators think that it's pretty close between those guys, they're probably going center with that pick. That would be the way that I would guess it plays out. I also think that there is a chance that when the pick comes around and if Martone is there, which by the way is no guarantee, he could go earlier than 5, but if he is there at number 5 and they're comparing him with Hagens or Denoyer or Frondel or whoever, and they think there's a big gap and Martone's the better player, then they will go with Porter Martone in that situation. So there's a lot of things that go into that. And, depending on who you ask, there are some people who think that James Hagens could turn into a top-line center in the NHL. There are some people that think that his ceiling is like a pretty good second-line center. Well, those are two very different things. Both are very valuable, and you need both of them, but those are two different things. The Predators have had, throughout their history, plenty of pretty good second-line centermen, and there's nothing wrong with that. And, if you draft one of these guys and that's what they end up being, I wouldn't say that they're a bust if that's what they end up being, but there's a difference between a pretty good second-line center and an elite top-line center. And that's part of the evaluation here too is, all right, well, how good do you think James Hagens is actually going to be if you're Barry Trotz?
Just like we were talking about the last segment, I think you're hoping Svechkov or Surin is a pretty good second-line center. That's what you are hoping to get out of those guys. If you're taking a guy 5th overall, you want him to be your top-line center. And I think you're right that if there's a big gap between the centerman who's there at 5 and Porter Martone, if you like Martone a significant amount better than the center, then obviously you take Martone. You don't reach at number 5 just because of position. But I also agree with you that Barry Trotz, I don't think it's lip service when he says that he'd prefer to draft a center. Like Barry Trotz, when he comes on the program, when he speaks to the media, I don't think he's BSing you. I don't think he's trying to throw up.
He doesn't have a
screen.
track record of that.
Right. He's a pretty straight up guy. And I think you, for the most part, can trust that he's going to try and be as honest with the media as possible and with the fans. Now, obviously, you do have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because he's not just going to straight up tell you everything that he's thinking.
Here are
ju-
all of my contingency plans.
Here is my exact draft board
Yes.
and what I will do depending on what player is there. He's not going to do that, but I do think that he, at least for the most part, tries to be straightforward when he's talking to fans in the media. And if he says he'd prefer to draft a center, I think that's the truth. But if a winger is a significant amount higher on the board than the center that's available, then obviously you don't reach down the board, especially when you're picking as high as the Predators are.
Skyler says, I love Martone the more and more I hear about him, but I do feel like Hagens needs to be the pick as far as the need. Ethan from Lawrenceburg says, I think Frondell, if he's there, is the better center prospect over Hagens. Well, I think there are a lot of people that agree with that. I mean, I see a lot of people having Frondell going at 3 to Chicago, and the size difference is certainly there. I mean, Frondell's, I think, 6'1". Yeah, 6'1", 204 is what he's listed at. I mean, really, it's not the only thing with Hagens that people are concerned about, but it is something. Like, Hagens is 5'10". He's 5'10", 186 pounds. Now, I went through it the other day. Look around the league. You can find a lot of really good 5'10", 5'11 players like, Kucherov, Braden Point, Connor Bedard's 5'10". Like, you can find all these guys that are pretty good players. Quinn Hughes on the back end, Jack Hughes. They're all 5'10", 5'11", somewhere in that range. I mean, look, I know that Jared has acted like Connor McDavid is 6'5" for a couple times the last couple weeks. Connor McDavid, I think, is listed at 6'1" and like 204 pounds. I'm here to tell you, Connor McDavid is probably right at 6 feet tall. I've stood next to him, and he's probably like right at 205 pounds, which, I mean, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But, like, it's not like Connor McDavid is some behemoth out there, is what I'm saying. Now, when you skate like that, it doesn't really matter. But that's the point. Like, Hagens doesn't skate like Connor McDavid, so let me make that clear. But Hagens is a really good skater, and I think in today's league, when you can skate that way and when you've got that dynamic playmaking ability, there have been some people that have compared him to Jack Hughes. We've had Adam Kimmelman from NHL.com on our show a couple times over the last few months, and he's compared him to Jack Hughes. So, if that's what they got, if you're drafting Jack Hughes, like, you'd sign up for that right now. That's a number one center right there if you're the Predators.
For sure. And people can, pick their flavor of which of these centers they think is the best, but you are guaranteed to get one of those top 4 centers as long as Schaefer goes number 1, which seems to be a foregone conclusion. But as soon as Schaefer comes off the board at 1, you are guaranteed that one of Misa, Frondell, Denoyer, and Hagens is going to be there. And I think and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like that is, there's a drop off after those 4. So you're going to have at least one of those guys on the board and Martone, or you're going to have 2 of them on the board. I don't think there's going to be a player that Nashville takes that is going to disappoint Preds fans if it is part of that group of 5 players where you're guaranteed that 2 of them will be there for you at 5.
I think, like I said, they're going to walk out of here with a good player. The question is how good and at what position. I am here to tell you, like, I actually think Porter Martone, when it comes down to it, is one of the safer picks out there because I think he's going to end up being a pretty darn good player in the NHL. I can tell you, though, if that's who they pick on Friday at number 5 overall, I mean, it's going to be a firestorm from a lot of Predators fans. And I understand it. I really do. Like, there is nobody that's been more familiar or have been screaming longer about finding a center around here than me. So I understand it. I really do. I would prepare for that possibility is what I'll say.
Yeah. And I do think that there would be a lot of Preds fans who would be unhappy with that pick, but I think you're right that Martone, maybe he doesn't have the higher ceiling because he doesn't play center. Like one of the texters said, centers are much harder to acquire than wingers.
Yes, they are.
You can find yourself a top 6 winger for much less of a cost than you can a top 6 centerman.
There's no doubt.
But again, if Porter Martone, if Barry Trotz believes that he is an elite player in this draft and he's not a huge fan of some of these centers, I don't think you can be all that upset about getting a player of that caliber in the top 5 I think it just depends on which centers Barry likes the most and who's sitting there at 5 when the Preds come on the clock.
Well, and I heard, Barry Trotz brought this up the other day. DVD discussed this yesterday too, and it is a good point. Brady Tkachuk was drafted by Ottawa in 2018, number 4 overall, and he is obviously not a center; he's a winger. And the pick before him was Jesperi Kotkaniemi from Montreal, who has since been offer sheeted by Carolina. And he's a good player. He's a center. He's a good player. He's not a great player. Like, he is a middle six type of guy, like, second line, third line, that type of guy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think everybody would agree if you lined up Kotkaniemi over here and Brady Tkachuk over here, even though Brady Tkachuk plays wing, who would you rather have? The answer is Brady Tkachuk. So, look, it's possible that sort of situation is here with Martone and Hagens, or Martone and Denoye, whoever, Brady Martin, whoever. And that's what your job with your scouting staff is right now to determine is Porter Martone Brady Tkachuk? Because if he's Brady Tkachuk, that's pretty
I'd
tempting
take
to
Brady
take.
Tkachuk.
Yeah, like, I think everybody would take that. If he's, Scott Hartnell, who I love, by the way, but like, there's a difference between Brady Tkachuk and Scott Hartnell. Both good players in their own right. Like, Brady Tkachuk can be a driver of a team, and you can do that from the winger. It's much easier to have your driver of your team be a centerman, because that's what McKinnon is. That's what McDavid is, what Crosby has been for a long time. And that's, to me, the number one way to win in the NHL. But not all centermen are created equal. So you got to keep that in mind as a part of the discussion as well. We'll have the best and worst things in sports coming up next. We'll take your best things, your worst things on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Bill Bender from Sporting News will be with us at 7 o'clock. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. It is that time of the week. It's time for the best and worst things in sports. We'll take your best things, your worst things on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Jake Lyman, kick us off with your best and worst things in the world of sports.
All right, best thing in sports this week was yesterday. We got a fun pitching matchup in Milwaukee. Paul Skeens, Jacob Mizorowski. I thought that was it was great. I thought the MLB did a great job of marketing it. They made it the free game of the day on MLB TV. They put it on MLB Network. Mizorowski actually ends up outdueling Paul Skeens, and the
Pumping
Miz,
it in there, man.
the Miz was right here in Nashville just a couple of weeks ago playing for the Sounds, and it's too early to make any kind of comparison, especially with how fickle the elbow can be for MLB pitchers, but he's got some DeGrom in him, throwing 96-mile-an-hour sliders. He sent, Willie Castro for the Twins to the ground last week. So I thought that was awesome. Great matchup and a great way to market two young rising stars in baseball. I'm going to stay with baseball for my worst thing in sports. You did a little rant on this, Robbie, on Tuesday. The umpiring in Game 2 of the College World Series National Championship on Sunday, throwing out Kevin Schnall and the first base coach for Coastal Carolina in the first inning. Just horrible. It was an ump show. We need better umpires at all levels, but I think especially at the college baseball level, you can't make that moment about yourself in a game that big on that stage. So that was horrible. That's my worst thing in sports this week.
Connor Newt, your best and worst things in the world of sports for this week.
My best would definitely have to be the Jake knows where I'm going with this, of course. The Dynasty Deep Dive on Tuesday, we got for the brand new.
You're such a nerd.
Yeah, I know. The brand new College Football 26, which, Robbie, this is the part I encourage you, or I try to sway you to buy it. It's not going to be the same game. It's going to be much, much better.
I don't know, man.
You got to do it, man.
This is typically how I operate or how I have operated. Now, granted, I'm now 32 years old with a wife and child.
Of course.
So it's a little bit different now. But, I mean, typically I would go I'll go buy NHL 17 and then I'll buy NHL 20.
Yeah.
And I'll go buy Madden 15 and then I'll buy Madden 19.
We're
I'll
done
just
with
wait
Madden
a little
now.
while. Yeah.
We're completely done with Madden.
I don't blame you.
But the worst thing in sports, I would have to go with Florida State quarterback Thomas Castellanos' comments this week, claiming he's tore up the ACC last year by himself. He is dead last in passing yardage as of last year. Claims Florida State's not going to be the same team it was last year, which may have some truth to it, but I'm not 100% sure it's going to be because of him. I think there's a level of cockiness to this guy, and I don't know why it's there, but it's there. So Thomas Castellanos is my worst thing in sports this week.
Didn't he start talking about Alabama some point,
He
too?
did. And then Lenore Sellers came out yesterday and said, yeah, that guy's an idiot. Don't listen to him. So
I watched Thomas Castellanos personally in Lane Stadium get blown out by a 6-6 Virginia Tech team. So I would say he did not tear up the ACC. That would be
maybe he did, but
they opened the
wrong
season with Alabama. It's Alabama at Florida State.
Lord.
On August the 30th. I mean, at least they got it at home, I guess.
It's going to be a great day of football that day. You got Texas, Ohio State to start the day off, Alabama, Florida State, and then what's the late game? Notre Dame.
Yeah, what is the late game? The week I remember looking at it. The week is it week?
Clemson LSU.
Clemson LSU.
That's
That's
it.
the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's a pretty good start.
Castellanos had
football season there.
He had the worst QBR in the ACC, by the way, with a 38.3.
Yeah, it's not very good. Not very good. My best thing in sports, the Florida Panthers Stanley Cup celebration continuing to rage on. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos from this. It's not Washington Capitals level in 2018
Right.
where Ovechkin is, swimming in the fountain out there. I don't know that anything's ever going to really top that. But the Panthers, specifically Sam Reinhart and Matthew Tkachuk, I don't really know how those two guys are still alive based on some of the videos that I've seen. They've not slept at all. They did an interview with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast from the pool in the Bahamas the other day. And they were talking about how they had basically gotten 5 hours of sleep that week since they won the Stanley Cup on Tuesday. And it's guys, maybe time to dial it down a little bit. But hey, they're enjoying that second championship. So some of the videos have been very funny.
I was at that Caps parade in 2018, and they were getting after it.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember all the videos of them at the Nats game like 3 days later,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Ovechkin was just
Bombed.
absolutely hammered.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Panthers, they're putting up their best performance after winning the second straight Stanley Cup. They've been all over the place.
Was it Sergei Bobrovsky who was just roaming around his neighborhood with the cup?
That was Barkov.
Barkov.
Yeah,
That's right.
Barkov was rolling around.
knocking on doors at
at like
a.m.
5 in the morning. You're like, hey, I have the Stanley Cup on the Ring doorbell. It's pretty funny. Pretty good stuff from the Panthers. My worst in sports real quickly. I don't know if you guys saw the Travelers Championship last week, but Tommy Fleetwood, I feel bad for you, man.
Brutal.
Had it won on that last hole and then just totally choked.
Some choculation going on.
I mean, that it's golf. That happens a lot in golf where the moment just becomes a little too big and it's painful to watch because it's just you out there, man. There's nobody else. It's just you playing. So tough one from Tommy Fleetwood this past weekend. We got Cam on the text line that says the worst is when the Braves aren't playing the New York Mets. Boy, do the Braves own the New York Mets this year.
I don't know what it is, but the Braves it's been a disappointing year by all accounts for the Braves, but when they see the blue and orange of the Mets on the other side, they turn back the clock to that World Series team a couple years ago.
It's
and
weird.
They play their best baseball.
It's really weird. Like it's like they get the Kyle Vandenbosch red contact red eyes out there. Like, that's the Mets. We've got to kill them. It's been really weird to watch, but I know that Braves fans have enjoyed it. I know that Willie Donick has not. So we'll see. We'll see if that continues.
I'm sure Willie and TD are not having a great week watching the Braves beat the Mets.
Not very happy. 615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll be joined by Bill Bender from Sporting News coming up next. We'll get his thoughts on all things college football. Alex Daugherty from the Tennessean will be with us at 7:30. We'll get back into the Predators and the NHL draft with him. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get it all. Robbie Stanley, Jake Lyman, Connor Newton here with you on this Thursday morning, talking some college football. And to help us do that, we head to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in Bill Bender to the program from the Sporting News. Bill, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Really appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. So, Bill, we've had this conversation throughout the week this week, and it's interesting to kind of look at all the different layers around it when it comes to Arch Manning. Obviously, Texas is loaded. Arch Manning's an unbelievably high recruit. We know the history of his family, all that. What do you make of kind of the hype around him heading into this season? And I know you caught up with Peyton Manning last week and talked with him about some of that. What do you make of what Peyton Manning had to say about it and your expectations for Arch heading into this year?
Well, Peyton, as usual, measured and smart analysis. He believes that a third year with the same offensive coordinator, the same coach, is going to help Arch. And he brought that out. And when Peyton played at the Colts, he had two coordinators the whole time. When he played at Tennessee, obviously, same coach, same coordinator. I think that makes a difference. I saw on you guys' X page, is he overhyped? Well, the hype is uncontrollable. The appetite for Arch Manning was so high last year, and he was the backup.
Oh, yeah.
Every time he came in a game, I know at Sporting News we were throwing 3 or 4 articles up. I wrote an analysis piece off his start against Mississippi State because I was assigned that. So I don't know if he can meet the hype, because the hype is like anything I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it's really interesting when it comes to that part of it, because like I almost feel bad for the kid in some ways because of what he's going to be compared to when he starts there. But I also, Bill, I look at that roster, and if you're looking at national championship favorites heading into this year, you don't get too far down the list before Texas is on there, in my thought.
Well, for sure. They're number one in several publications. What an opener against Ohio State. That could easily be 1 versus 2. And you're starting the season that way at noon in week 1. So that's going to be an awesome game to watch. Last year when these two teams played, they had, I think they sent 26 guys to the NFL draft. So we could look back on that game last year and that total could end up being 50 or 60. So, yeah, I think Texas, their schedule's tough, though, tougher than last year, especially in the SEC. So I think, for me, I read the reports. It's pure speculation. Peyton wouldn't bite on this question either. I wouldn't be surprised if Arch Manning stayed 2 seasons at Texas, and we get the best of Arch Manning next year.
Talking college football with Bill Bender from the Sporting News here on Robby and Rexrode. Bill, I'm looking at your article from this morning predicting the 12-team college football playoff. You got Texas as the top overall seed. I'm interested to see Navy here as the Group of 5 champion that gets in. What do you see from the midshipmen that would allow them to get into the college football playoff this year?
That would be awesome, first of all, to have a service academy in the playoff. Horvath, dual all quarterback. He got hurt last year, missed a little bit of time, but they're not like run it every time. Navy, they can throw a little bit, and in that conference, I think they'll do well. It's not them. You could go UNLV or Boise State out of the Mountain West Conference. One of the things in that playoff projections article that I did, and I'm sure all 12 teams are correct, by the way.
Oh yes.
A lot of the same teams in there, and I think that's something that could easily happen, that you could get 6 or 7 teams that were in the playoff last year come right back in.
Bill, what do you make of where Tennessee sits now in the aftermath of the Nico Iamaleava drama over the spring? You've got Joey Aguilar in there at quarterback now, and we'll see, if Jake Merklinger in camp can make a run to be the starting quarterback, or if it's just going to be Aguilar heading into the season. But obviously a lot of drama in the spring, a college football playoff team last year, a lot of questions even beyond quarterback on the offensive side of the ball. So how do you view where Tennessee and Josh Heupel are heading into this year?
Well, I mean, they dropped a few spots. When you lose a quarterback like Nico, I mean, they were 10-3, and he was very efficient. Now you're bringing in Joey Aguilar, and how quickly can he catch up? Playmaking skills are there. I liked how Joey Aguilar played when they played Power 4 schools. I would watch those games. North Carolina was one that stood out. But he'll have to cut down the interceptions, and in theory, in Josh Heupel's quarterback-friendly offense, he will. I think here's the struggle this year is, yes, Josh Heupel got patted on the back quite a bit after they let Nico go and taking a stand for college football. But does that taking a stand mean you go 7-5? Then there won't be as much applause at that point. So I do hope they do well. They are in that middle part of the SEC where everybody, to me, from LSU through A&M and Oklahoma, you got 10 teams ranked in preseason polls. All of them have questions, and all of them could be that third or fourth team in the SEC. I think after Georgia and Texas, it opens up, and that's why they're trying to get all these playoff berths.
Bill, I'll bring you to the other side of the state over here in Nashville with Vanderbilt coming off a huge year for that program, win 6 games, upset Alabama. Do you think they can sustain it this year? Obviously have Diego Pavia back under center, bringing back Eli Stowers, who's an NFL tight end prospect. Do you think Vandy can build on what was a great year last year and become bowl eligible again this season?
It's going to be tough. I mean, it's tough to replicate some of the things that they did, and this schedule is tough. But, and obviously Diego Pavia made some waves up here in Big Ten country with his comments a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
And my thought on that is very impressed with Diego in that Alabama game last year. I was impressed in the Texas game. Played very well in that game. They didn't win, but he played well. They play in the Big Ten's a little bit different. When you're going up against 5 defenses, Iowa, Michigan, High State, Penn State, that really give up more than like 17 points per game, it's a little bit tougher style. I think there are good quarterbacks in the Big Ten. I think Diego Pavia would be an effective quarterback in the Big Ten, but I was a little surprised he took a shot at like Nebraska. I didn't know if that just tells me that there's a whole generation of player that doesn't remember Nebraska, I guess, in the 90s when I was growing up, and they didn't even have to throw the ball to beat you.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So, Bill, what do you make of where all this is maybe headed at this point when it comes to college football playoff expansion and potential automatic bids that could be associated with the Big Ten and the SEC and the debate with that right now? Obviously, I mean, this has been a changing landscape over the last 4 or 5 years at this point that we talked a lot about, talked with you about. But what do you make of kind of the latest installment of where this could all be headed with the college football playoff?
Well, I hope we get to 16 for the SEC and the Big Ten's sake. I think they should be in the front leading that charge so they can get all of their playoff caliber teams in the playoff. That's kind of how I would sell it. Now, my editor, he's a Vanderbilt grad. He wants to stay at 12, and I'm like, why? Well, so Alabama and Miami have, teams get left out. And I'm thinking, I would rather the teams get in, because one of the drawbacks of last year, and I know you guys probably felt this, was that first weekend of the playoff, what was on my timeline was people complaining that Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss weren't in the playoff. It literally, South Carolina would have crushed SMU, those type things. Well, if we go to 16, then all the teams that should be in, for the most part, are in. Miami would have been, Alabama is in. And then we play the first 2 rounds on campus. How cool would that be? That everybody, that was the coolest part of last year, seeing that I was at Ohio State, Tennessee. That game was a lot of fun. Not for the Vols, but it was a lot of fun regardless.
Well, Bill, really appreciate your time as always. Thanks so much for taking time to be with us this morning. College football season right around the corner, so we're getting there, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, that went quick, man. We could have talked for an hour. Thanks so much for having me. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Absolutely. Bill Bender, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. Take more of your thoughts on what Bill had to say, 615-737-1025. I do want to get to the Arch Manning part of this, because we heard from Bill Bender there, and he talked with Peyton Manning last week about kind of the situation that Arch is walking into. There was another prominent voice in college football that maybe doesn't understand some of the hype around Arch Manning. We'll get into that coming up next. Alex Daugherty from the Tennessean at 7:30. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Tune in to ESPN 94.9 The Fan tonight as the Nashville Sounds take on Jacksonville. Pregame at 5:50, first pitch at 6:05. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at thegamenashville.com. Sounds baseball on ESPN 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks and Family Leisure. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Appreciate Bill Bender from the Sporting News for being with us in the last segment. We'll take your thoughts on all things college football. Let's head to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Adam in Portland to the program. Adam, good morning. Thank you for calling in.
Hey, Robby, man. Hey, you want to know what's funny, dude, is I'm sitting here with my 7-year-old last night, and his name's Peyton, and he's like, how did I get my name? And I'm like, there was a great football player here, man, like, and he's awesome, and I loved him. And so that's where my head is with the Mannings, right? With this Manning, though, dude, like, there's so much pressure on him, Robby. I'm kind of in lockstep with you on that. Like, I feel like he almost needs that second year that dude was talking about. Like, because they don't look the same, man. I thought Ewers was way better. And just him being athletic, like, it's like he's not even from the same family. The only thing similar is the name on the jersey. So I hope he does well. But dude, I feel like there's going to be so much pressure. There's a good chance this could look like, before it's, I don't want to say Deion's kid necessarily, where he comes out and, we have all those problems. But at the same time, dude, like, it doesn't look like a Manning to me yet. So I feel like there's a lot of unnecessary pressure on him.
Thanks for calling him. It's going to be really interesting. First off, the roster that Texas had this year is just loaded. I mean, they're going to be either number 1 or number 2 heading into the year, depending on who you ask. The opening game they've got with Ohio State, I mean, it could be awesome. So I'm looking forward to that. Arch Manning, look, he's a very high level recruit. Obviously, his last name, there's a lot that comes with that. I would agree. Like, he doesn't play like Peyton or Eli. He's different that way. He's more athletic. I mean, if you go and watch Archie back in the day, he kind of looks more like that, right? Like the athleticism that he brings to the table. It's going to be really interesting to see how he plays here. Now, Steve Spurrier made a lot of noise the other day. He was on another duly noted podcast, and they had a YouTube stream, and I watched some of it because anytime I get a chance to watch Steve Spurrier talk, it's pretty funny. So they were just kind of spitballing out there and talking about a bunch of other random stuff like Georgia track and like just all this random stuff. And somehow, Arch Manning in Texas came up, and here was the quote that really got people going from Steve Spurrier. He said, quote, "Most people are picking Texas to win the SEC in football. They've got Arch Manning already winning the Heisman too. My question is, if he was this good, how come they let Quinn Ewers play all the time last year?" And he started talking about, like, Quinn Ewers was a 7th round pick and he was injured all the time. He's like, well, if Arch Manning's that good, why in the world was Quinn Ewers playing for Texas last year? So that has got people buzzing around the state of Texas and around the world of college football, Jake.
This is why when there were lots of people on the text line and lots of Titans fans saying, trade out of the number 1 pick and we can get Arch Manning next year. I'm like, well, the guy who just started over Arch Manning was he was not even in contention to be a day 2 pick. I like Arch Manning, and I think he's going to be good. But to act like he was this shoe-in number 1 overall pick when he started, 3 or 4 games in his college career, it's crazy. And it is a name thing. If his name was Arch Smith, I don't think he's being talked about the way that he's being talked about right now. I like him, and I do think that he probably does need 2 years. And who knows, maybe in his second year, he does take a big step and becomes the guy that everybody hopes he's going to be. But acting like Arch Manning is going to jump in this year and immediately be a Heisman winning quarterback feels like it's more based on his last name than it is based on anything he's actually done on a football field.
Well, I'm looking at the odds right now to be the Heisman Trophy winner this year. The favorite for the Heisman Trophy, according to FanDuel Sportsbook, is Arch Manning at plus 700.
I don't get that.
Garrett Nussmeier right behind him. You got Klubnik, Jeremiah Smith, who should be in that conversation.
Yep.
So they're kind of all jumbled up together. But the betting favorite right now, according to FanDuel, to win the Heisman Trophy is Arch Manning. And I'm also looking on FanDuel for the NFL draft next year, and the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick is Arch Manning at plus 230 on FanDuel Sports.
Plus 230?
Yeah.
Man.
So you've got FanDuel as having Arch Manning to be the favorite to win the Heisman and to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft next year.
Is that FanDuel maybe just trying to sucker people into making that bet? I'm like, hey, he's the favorite. You should bet on him. I I would be stunned if Arch Manning is the number 1 overall pick next year.
I would probably be more surprised by that. I don't think I would be all that surprised if he wins the Heisman, mainly because I think Texas's roster is really good, and I think they're going to be really good. And look, like, I think some of the hype is getting out of control a little bit with him, but I do think he's going to be pretty darn good.
I think he's going to be good, and I think Texas is going to be really good.
Yeah, so like when you have that combination of a player who I think is going to be good and a team that has a chance to be electric, like the Heisman part of it, he's going to be in that conversation if they're a 10, 11, 12 win team. Right. So he's going to be in that if they're that. Like, I keep coming back to everybody just assumes that he's coming out after this year and going to the NFL when his family has not done that. Like, Eli stayed all 4 years at Ole Miss. Peyton stayed all 4 years at Tennessee. And I realize he's not Eli Manning and he's not Peyton Manning. But that's kind of been the way they've operated, and he's been different than a lot of modern day college athletes. Like, he did not play at Texas much over the course of his first couple years there. And now he's getting his shot, but he didn't transfer. If you believe, I mean, I mentioned Bill Bender. He talked with Peyton Manning last week, and I read that piece at the Sporting News. And if you listen to Peyton, it was like, well, yeah, transferring like never even entered his mind. Like, he likes Texas. He wants to go to school at Texas. He likes Sarkisian. So, like, he's been incredibly patient throughout this entire approach. And I don't think that that's just going to change next year. And I mean, look, I guess if he goes out and he throws for 400 yards a game and they go win the national championship and he wins the Heisman Trophy and he looks at it and he says, well, I don't know how to get him a whole lot better than what I just did this year, then I guess he could come out and be different at that point. I feel like there's way too much just assuming that he's coming out in the NFL draft next year.
And you do make a good point of, if he is the quarterback on the best team in the country, he's going to be in the Heisman conversation. And if he wins the Heisman, how often does a Heisman winner who's draft eligible stay in college? I get that he's a little bit different because of his family, but you could make that argument that he could come out if he does have a season like that. I think Nussmeier is probably a better quarterback. I think, as one of our texters says, Lenora Sellers may end up being a better quarterback than Arch Manning. But I do think if Arch is in the conversation, there's a chance that he could take home the Heisman Trophy. And again, it's like, who wins the Heisman has been in college for 3 years and doesn't go into the draft. So maybe there's an outside.
Not a long list. Not a long list for sure, but I'm really fascinated to see how he does this year. I mean, look, it's not all the last name. Like, he's a good player. He's recruited. He's ranked that high for a reason. Like, he's pretty darn good, but we'll see what that looks like on the college level. I mean, really, this whole quarterback class, if you want to throw Arch Manning in there, like Drew Aller.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what he looks like.
He's had his moments.
Klubnik's getting a lot of buzz.
Yeah.
I need to see more from Klubnik in big games than I've seen for me to really buy some of that.
Right.
Nussmeier, we'll see. Like, Sellers, I think, has a chance to be really good. And then people have just totally forgotten about Carson Beck, who was going to be the number 1 pick if you ask people last year heading into the season. And now he's at Miami. We'll see what that looks like for him down there. But you got to throw him in the mix too.
It's kind of a wild card year when it comes to quarterbacks. Like, I could see pretty much any of those guys you named right there being the number 1 pick next year, but I also could see any of them coming, or whoever has eligibility, coming back for another year because they didn't have a good season. So we'll see. Connor bringing up the college football game a couple segments ago. My favorite Arch Manning story is last year when he turned down being in the game because he wanted to focus on football. And all the memes came out of like, does Arch Manning think that every time someone boots up Texas that he's got to go play for him? Yeah. Like, that was so fun. It's like, no, I'm not going to be in the game. I want to focus on real football. I'm like, well, you don't really have to do anything.
Yeah, just got to sign.
You just got to sign a paper.
It's all good. It's all good on that front. Alex Daugherty from the Tennessean will be with us coming up next. We'll get his thoughts on all things Predators and the NHL draft. The Rob Rant coming up at 7:45. All that had Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Jake Lyman, Connor Newt here with you on this Thursday morning. We are one day away from the NHL draft and finding out who the Predators will select at number 5 overall. And to help us talk about that and all things Nashville Predators, we head to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in our friend Alex Daugherty, who does an outstanding job covering the Nashville Predators for the Tennessean. Alex, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. It's a big week, huge week for people who love the NHL draft, which I love. So
big week, a little bit of a different draft this year, decentralized, which apparently they're getting rid of after 1 year. So we'll see what that looks like as they move forward.
Yeah, last year at the Sphere in Las Vegas was pretty epic. I'm not going to lie. So I'm just going to be sitting there at Bridgestone Arena, which is fine, but it's not the Sphere in Las Vegas.
Well, you should go back to the Sphere this year and see if they'll turn on the draft for you.
Maybe I'll do that.
I got a request to make. So, Alex, obviously you were there the other day for the Barry Trotz press conference, and I thought his answer to you about, the idea of Porter Martone and him being a winger and how do you weigh that versus being a centerman was really interesting. He went on with Jared later in the day and said, his preference would be to draft a centerman. So what do you make of kind of that debate where the Predators could land in that? And if it's like Martone and Higgins or Martone and Frondell or whoever that you're picking between at 5, how do you see that going if you're the Predators?
Yeah, that to me I think is the crucial question. Assuming that they're going to pick at 5, which I think they will, not going to trade it or anything. If and Barry Trotz said he sees the picks, 3 through 8 as all pretty similar players, or at least in terms of their talent level. They're all different players, but in terms of their talent level, 3 through 8, you could kind of interchange, and you're going to get a good player no matter what. So in that respect, what is the deciding factor between, a winger that could be a really good goal scorer? I mean, Porter Martone has a lot of comparisons that are very intriguing. I think you could compare him to like a Philip Forsberg. I don't think he's quite like Philip Forsberg, but that's sort of like the similar power forward, good skater, good scorer type player, but plays wing. And then there's obviously James Higgins, who is smaller and quicker and maybe a little bit shiftier, but could run into issues with size. But there's plenty of undersized, 5'11", 5'10" centers in the league that are very good. So what is the deciding factor? And it sounds to me like he said, if it comes down to position as the tiebreaker, they would go with the position, but only if the two players are really close. So if they view Martone and Higgins as very close, I think they're going Higgins because of the center position. However, at the very end of it, he seemed to suggest at the end of that answer, he said, Martone would be a really good pick at number 5. And
he did say that.
I kind of interpreted that as they think Martone is going to go higher than 5. I think they think that maybe he's going to go at 3 or 4. To either Utah or Chicago. Yeah. And I could definitely see that. I mean, I think Martone's a great talent. So, and I think those teams could use, the bigger scoring winger as opposed to a smaller center. So I think that's the real important question. And then, but the other thing is, there's other guys that are on the board that could be there that, assume Higgins and Martone are there, they could still go for someone like a Brady Martin, or they could go for Caleb Denoyer, or there's all kinds of options there. I just think that he did indicate that if it's a tiebreaker, they would look at position as the tiebreaker, which I think is important.
Alex, with the decentralized draft, how are we going to know when Barry's on the phone this year?
I am heartbroken that I cannot reveal that information anymore. That was my favorite part of watching. And if they go back to it in a couple of years, it will return. But I think that's the part about the draft that I think was really fun, is that they're all on the floor. You can see where all the GMs and scouts are running around. You can see movement. You can see phone calls happening. That made it very unique. You don't get that in the NFL draft, and I don't think you get that in the NBA draft. But That's too bad, but it's okay. We'll just have to imagine that Barry Trotz is on the phone a lot over the next couple days.
Well, if he is on the phone, do you think that there's a scenario where those 2 later first-round picks, one or both, maybe get packaged in a trade, or do you see the Preds sticking and picking and making 3 first-round picks tomorrow night?
I think that they probably make 3 first-round picks. The value of those last 2 picks, it really kind of worked out where they're almost equal, right? So 23 and 26 are the relative value of those is really close. I mean, maybe they do something where they drop back out of 26 to get another extra pick in the 3rd round, or maybe they get another pick in the 26 drafts, which they like to do. They like to push the draft selection to the later draft, especially since next year's draft is supposed to be a little deeper. I could see that, but I do think they'll make the pick at 23 because, they had the pick at 22 last year and got Igor Surin, who they really like. So they know they can get a good player at 23. Maybe they drop out at 26, but I do think that they'll make at least 2 picks, probably all 3. The rest of the draft draft picks in the NHL, the drop off after the first round and even the early second round in terms of pick value is just so drastic. I mean, the values of a 3rd round pick are just, they're just almost nothing. I mean, it's you're taking a real shot in the dark on a 3rd round pick. So if you have 4 shots in the dark, it just doesn't really do much for you. So I think they'll probably make the picks, but the first round is what matters, right? If you nail the first round picks, you're setting yourself up for success. That all the good teams in the NHL that are good now have nailed their first round picks, and the Predators have not, and that's why they're not as good right now. So they need these first round picks to land.
So Alex, to that point, Trotz was talking the other day about the roster that he's got. And, he said a couple of times that, you can't tell me that Ryan O'Reilly and Forsberg and Yossi and all these guys that we know aren't good players and that there's not some level of bounce back in it, which I understand to some degree. I also look at where they're at right now at center ice. And, The Athletic came out with a piece the other day ranking center ice quality throughout the league. They were 32nd in that ranking, which is about right. I mean, when you look at it, it's about right. So, until you dramatically fix that, it's hard for me to get to them contending for anything. So with all that being said, I'm with you. I'm interested to see what they do with these first round picks, but beyond that, how active do you think the Predators could or should be over the next couple of weeks here, free agency, trade, whatever you want to call it, to build for next year's roster, which Barry Trotz seems to think that they can get back to being a playoff team and maybe being competitive?
Well, I think it's interesting that Barry Trotz has come out and said multiple times now they're in kind of win now mode. They do think that they can bounce back and be instantly competitive, and they're worried about this team rather than the team in a few years. However, in the same breath, he kind of talks about they're not going to be super active in free agency. So they're not going to be in on Mitch Marner. They're not going to be on John Tavares, Nikolai Ehlers. They're not going to be on – doesn't sound like they'll be in on Aaron Ekblad, although that's probably because he's probably going to re-sign in Florida. So, if he's telling the truth, if Trotz really thinks this year is really worth going for again, why is he not adding another piece? Why is he not adding another center? Why is he thinking that, okay, this year we'll just go with Fedor Svechkov as the second line center, which to me just kind of has shades of last year. Well, we think Tommy Novak can be the second line center. Right. Nothing against Fedor Svechkov, but I mean, you and I both know, when they went into last year thinking Tommy Novak was going to be the second line center, it was like, this is a huge question mark. Svechkov will be maybe a little less of a question mark because he's shown that he can handle some things there, but certainly not. He's not going to be the one to unlock Steven Stamkos and put him back, bring him back to being a 40-goal scorer again. So yeah, it's like it's hard to believe. I think you made the point recently that this is sort of what's he supposed to say. He's not going to go up there and say, yeah, sorry Stamkos, sorry Marchessault and Shea and Forsberg, but we're worried about the 2029 Predators. We're worried about what happens when Igor Surin comes over here because they don't even know who Igor Surin is. They're ready to win now. So he has to say that. At the same time, they've got $14 million in cap space. Why not go try to sign somebody really good? Why not get in on the Nikolai Ehlers sweepstakes? Why not try to go after Brad Marchand? You know, these are or Brock Besser. These are just things that I think show you that I don't think Trotz is fully convinced that this year is just going to be an instant success. So he's not going to commit any more money to it, which he probably needs to if he really believes that.
Alex, last thing for you here. Is it bad that as we sit here a day before the NHL draft, the pick that I feel the most certain about them making in terms of like a player that I think is going to be a Nashville Predator is Blake Fiddler? It's got Predators written all over it. They've got 2 picks in the 20s. That's right around the range where most people have him going. Obviously a connection with his father to the organization. He's from Nashville. It's too perfect. Blake Fiddler's going to be a Predator.
You know, when I was leaving the Vegas draft last year, and I was walking out of the Sphere, I was looking at the 2025 draft a year ago, and I started seeing, wait, Blake Fiddler, I know that last name. And then I started looking at, oh, yeah, this guy's going to be pretty good. Let's keep an eye on him. So then over the course of the year, you start seeing him climb up in the rankings. And then I was like, you know what? Let's just commit to it. We've got to get this guy drafted by the Nashville Predators. And it turns out he would not only be the first Nashville-born first-round pick, or at least he's going to be the highest pick by, you know, of a Nashville-born player, because of course he was born in Nashville. He would be the first Nashville Predators fan drafted by the Predators, because he, you know, was a fan of his father when he played, and then obviously when Vernon Fiddler came back to the Predators in 2017, he was 10 years old and was right there rooting him on. And he has said multiple times, you know, Vernon told me that no matter where he played, he was always rooting for the Predators. So when he was with the Dallas Stars and the New Jersey Devils and everything, he was rooting for the Predators. His son was. So I think it would be a great story. And by the way, he's also pretty good. He's a 6'4" right-handed defenseman who would fit perfectly with the Predators right now. So I hope it happens.
Go ahead and print the jersey. It's happening tomorrow. I'd be stunned if it doesn't. Alex, great stuff, man. Appreciate you taking time to be with us. Going to be fun tomorrow. I'll see you at the arena, and we'll talk to you soon.
That's right. Y'all take it easy.
615-737-1025, our phone number. Alex Daugherty does a great job covering the Predators for the Tennessean. We'll have the Rob rant coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game.
Don't make me angry.
Sometimes you have to tell someone to pound sand.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
This is the Rob Rant.
No!
Now on Robby and Rexrode.
Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. It is time for the Rob Rant here on the program. We'll take your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. All right, so the NHL is in discussions with the NHLPA. They're trying to put together their new CBA. And apparently things are going pretty well, and they're not that far away from a new CBA between the NHL and the NHLPA, which if you've been a hockey fan long enough, anytime these two start talking and they're making progress, it's a good thing because in my lifetime, they've had 2 lockouts, and lockouts have been a problem in this league. It was a full season back in 2005, and they missed basically half the year in 2013. So lockouts have been a problem in this league. And frankly, there's a lot of things going right for hockey right now. There's the Four Nations tournament that was an unbelievable success. The game, I think, is at a really good place. The Olympics are coming up next year, best on best. It's going to be awesome to watch. So, not doing anything to screw all that up would be great if you're the NHL and the NHLPA. So I think that's going to happen. Now, this was kind of, at least to me, I had not really heard much about this until the last day or two. And now it looks like it could either be a part of this CBA or at least is on the table and being heavily discussed. And that is the idea of going from 82 regular season games to 84 regular season games. Now, I saw this, and Kevin Weeks put this out there. I think Greg Wyshynski put this out there about the idea of going from 82 to 84. And basically, the major shift there would be you would make the preseason quicker, which, look, I've talked to players on the Predators. I've talked to players throughout the league. The majority of them will tell you they need 1, maybe 2 preseason games, and then they're ready to go. Now, for the organization, it's a little bit more valuable than that because you can look, especially early in the preseason, go look at some of these lineups. There ain't very many NHL players in there. There's a lot of taking a look at, some of your draft picks or some of your prospects and seeing how they play at that level. So there's value in it from that perspective. I think most fans do not care at all about the NHL preseason, so we're okay with the idea of taking some of those away. But I saw this get posted yesterday, and the reaction is basically what I thought it would be. 82 games seems to me to be enough in the NHL. I don't think we need to go to 84. I mean, I think you can limit the preseason if you really want to and still have 82 games. Now, I know that these owners and everybody involved, if they could get, one more gate, no matter where it is in the preseason for money, they'll take it. So I understand the money part of this, but just from the fan part of it, I don't really love the idea of going to 84 games. We've been at 82 for a long while at this point. You kind of judge records and seasons and point totals and stats and all these things based off the 82 game schedule that we've had for a while now. And is it a huge change if they go to 84? No, I don't think that's as dramatic of a change as the NFL going from 16 to 17, and then they're eventually getting to 18. It will happen. It's 2 more games in the regular season in hockey. It's not the world's biggest deal. I'm not that upset about it. But I do look at it and I say, I still think we're missing, to me, what I've talked about several different times here is kind of a big part of this as to why your ratings sometimes don't look great in the playoffs. Pierre LeBrun's been banging this drum for a while. Start the season earlier. And by the time basically the calendar is ending in May, that's when you should be ending your cup final, May 30th, May 31st. That's when you should be ending your cup final. And I understand that part of it. I'd actually probably go the other way. And I know they'll never do this, so I'm the only one that probably thinks this, and that's fine. I think the more of your season that you can have that doesn't directly compete against football, the better off you are in the United States of America. They start in October. And look, when they start the NHL regular season, Jake, the fact of the matter is we're right in the heat of college football, right in the heat of the NFL, And the NFL goes until mid-February at this point. So I think go the other way, start a little bit later. I'm not saying you have to start by like Christmas, but start in like November. Go a little bit later and have more of your regular season not going head to head with the NFL and football. That would be the way I would do it. That would also mean probably stretching your cup final out until July, which is why they will never, ever, ever, ever do this. And I'm the only one that thinks it, but that's okay. But that's the latest in the NHL is they are apparently thinking about adding 2 more games of the regular season, 84.
It just feels unnecessary to add 2 more games. I mean, it feels like such an even number, even though 82 is kind of random also, but you get the same amount as the NBA. It's right about half of the MLB. It just feels right to be 82 games. 84 looks weird, but I get what you're saying. For the casual sports fan who maybe isn't a diehard NHL fan, starting it as late as possible is better because most people are locked in on football pretty much through all of January into February at this point before they change their sights to the NBA, college basketball, and the NHL. So I would be with you actually about moving it back. The expansion of everything just makes no sense. And I know Connor is one of the main opponents of expanding the NCAA basketball tournament.
God, no, don't do it.
I've heard heard that that's coming down soon if they do it.
Yeah.
76 teams.
Well, let me say this. I would rather them expand the regular season from 82 to 84 than expand the Stanley Cup playoff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't want any part of this stupid NBA play-in stuff that they do, which I know some people have floated out in the NHL. Gary Bettman, to his credit, has really had no appetite for that so far. I don't want, because we're at 32 teams now, you expanding the playoff to 20. Like, you know, you're still at 16. Half the league makes the playoff. That's enough. I don't need it to be any more than that. So that's why I'm not that upset about this. Like, some people are. Some people are really mad about the idea of going from 82 to 84. Like, we got Sean on the text line that says hockey needs like 10 less games rather than 2 more. And I understand that point of view. I really do. They're not going to have less games because of the money that's involved with it. So I think that's something we probably need to understand. But I would rather them expand the regular season by a couple games than get any ideas in their head about ruining the Stanley Cup playoffs.
For sure. I think the NHL has found the perfect format for the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think baseball was great too back in the day when it was just 4 teams made the playoffs. And I get that the money is always going to win out. I think baseball has hurt their postseason product by expanding the playoffs. I think the NHL would be doing the same thing. Everybody loves the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, casual sports fans who don't follow hockey will watch hockey because the Stanley Cup playoffs are just great television. You don't need to change anything about that.
I got one text that says, I couldn't agree more with you, Robbie. Hand the cup out in early July, and there's only 1 month of no sports on TV until preseason football. I agree. That's how I would do it. I just know they're not going to do that. Like, I don't think the NHL wants to go into July. And look, I know that would also affect like your typical, like July 1st is typically when free agency starts. Like, you wouldn't be doing that anymore. I understand all that. I mean, I don't think they're going to do that. I think if anything, they might eventually start a little earlier than they do. I just view it through the lens of try to compete directly with football less. That should be everybody's goal. Like, I think the NBA, this is also a take I don't think will ever happen. I think the NBA should start on Christmas Day. I think that should be opening day in the NBA. It'll never happen, but that's when I think the NBA should start.
I'm with you. You do that, and then you could have the finals in August and the draft right. You can keep your draft and free agency right after.
And by the way, the NFL's getting ready to start at that point.
And the NBA would basically own July and August. It would make sense, but they'll never do that.
615-737-1025, our phone number. 615-737-1025. We're going to get into the Titans coming up next, and we'll get a little bit into a conversation that I had with Stilla yesterday. And my general question for Connor, for Jake, for all of you is Brian Callahan doomed as Titans head coach walking into this year? We'll get into all that. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Robbie Stanley, Jake Lyman, Connor Newt here with you on this Thursday morning. I got some tickets to give away, a 4-pack of tickets to the FIFA Club World Cup match coming up tonight at Geodis Park. We got Al Hilal taking on CF Pachuca at 8 o'clock. Connor Newt, big Pachuca fan, as he just talked about in the break.
I can't wait.
Be calling number 3, 615-737-1025. 615-737-1025. Caller 3 will win a 4-pack of tickets to the FIFA Club World Cup match coming up tonight at Geodis Park. So make sure you get in on that. We got a lot of things to get into this hour. We will get back into the Predators a little bit later in the hour. But, Jake, I want to start on a little bit of a conversation that I had with Stilly yesterday on Jared versus Joe. Now, he was approaching it through the lens of the off-season program that the Titans have run and how Brian Callahan has put the emphasis on leadership, and they're doing all these competitions and games, and it does have maybe a little bit of a duck goose feel to it, but it's fine. I don't really have a huge problem with it. And it was OTAs and minicamp when we're talking about all this. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, what happens in OTAs and minicamp really doesn't matter all that much to me. I mean, last year in OTAs, we were talking about how well like J.C. Latham was moving the Olga and Bertha tackle dummies that Bill Callahan put out there. And by the time the end of the year came around, they apparently decided that they didn't want him playing left tackle anymore and wanted him playing right tackle. We were talking about Tavondre Sweat and I just don't know that he's going to be in good enough shape. And then he ended up being fine throughout the year. He was in good shape. He played all those things. So I think there's a limitation on what things that happen in OTAs and minicamp actually mean. I kind of approach it this way. And, he's a 3-14 head coach right now until proven otherwise. I understand, and we have talked about in great detail, the idea that it would not seemingly be good for Cam Ward if you get through his first year and you remove the coaching staff out from underneath him and you start that cycle of different coaches, different offensive systems, different offensive coordinators that early in Cam Ward's career. We've seen that happen in the NFL. It's usually not a very good thing. If you want your quarterback to succeed, the hope should be that there's some stability there with the head coach. Now, one thing I've also said is you can't do stability just for the sake of stability. If Brian Callahan, by game 10 this year, points out it's just clear that he doesn't know what he's doing and he's not a good head coach, well, that's also detrimental to Cam Ward. And I'm just looking back through this, and we've talked about this earlier in the offseason, but it is kind of remarkable how often teams that have the first overall pick and end up taking a quarterback fire their head coach the next year. Like, it happens all the time. Now, I will say, like, the chief offender of that is the Chicago Bears. They haven't been first overall picks,
but
other than Caleb Williams.
Trubisky.
But Trubisky, what was he, second? I think he was number 2.
Justin Fields.
They fired the head coach that first year. Justin Fields, head coach got fired his first year. And then, of course, last year, Caleb Williams and Eberflus gets fired after that debacle on Thanksgiving. If you go back and look at it, it happens a lot when teams draft a quarterback really high or even first overall and their coach gets fired like the next year. So history's kind of working against Brian Callahan that way. Jake, I still look at the roster and I can identify a whole bunch of holes that this Titans team has. So I guess my question to you is Brian Callahan doomed before this thing starts heading into year 2 as head coach of the Tennessee Titans?
I think doomed is a strong word. I don't know if he's doomed because I think most of what Brian Callahan is going to be judged on is how good is Cam Ward. If he can develop Cam Ward and have him looking like an offensive rookie of the year candidate, then even if you go 6-11, I don't think he's going to get fired because there are a lot of holes on the roster. And I think, at least in what they've said, the Titans are trying to be more patient. And so I've said to Connor on our Saturday show plenty of times, I don't think the win total is necessarily the most important thing for Brian Callahan this year. But if 5 games in, Cam Ward looks lost out there. The Titans aren't going to blame Cam Ward. They're going to blame Brian Callahan. That is what I am a little concerned with Brian Callahan is he didn't develop Will Levis last year. Like, Will Levis looked worse, much worse in his second year than he did in his rookie season when, again, we only saw him for about 9 games, but he looked like he didn't know what he was supposed to do out there last season. That's a little bit of an indictment on Brian Callahan. And if Cam Ward doesn't look good early on, I think that's going to be when the possibility of Brian Callahan being fired mid-season comes out, is if Cam Ward doesn't look like a number 1 overall pick. Again, it's not going to fall on Cam Ward. It's not going to fall on Mike Borgonzi. It's going to fall on Brian Callahan.
Well, it's interesting. Like I'm here that was on NFL.com in 2016. So you're talking about almost a decade ago at this point. And basically the point of it was, just because you draft a franchise quarterback, that does not mean that you've got job security as a head coach. And as you read through this, like the point basically ended up being, if anything, it kind of speeds up your clock. Like you better show some progress pretty early with the quarterback, because if you don't, the quarterback and the GM are going to be tied together. Like the GM made the pick and the quarterback, he's going to be the last one that gets blamed. Like eventually time runs out on the quarterback and people blame the quarterback. Like Marcus is a good example. They exhausted pretty much every option could around here before finally they're just like, yeah, it's Marcus. We just can't do it anymore. And Ryan Tannehill took over and we know what happened. Like, I'm reading this NFL.com piece from 2016 and it's talking about Wisenhunt, right? Like Mariota got taken at number 2 and Wisenhunt was out less than half a season into Mariota's tenure. Now, look, if you were around for the Wisenhunt era and you're a Titans fan, it was horrible, and he did a horrible job, and he was a jerk about a lot of things, and that didn't help him. I mean, other than week 1s where he was unbelievable, if you gave Ken Wisenhunt 6 months to prepare for a game, he was really good. Beyond that, the tenure went pretty poorly. So, like, I'm not saying that Ken Wisenhunt should have had more time here with the Titans, but go back and look at the examples over the last 10 years. There's a lot of high quarterbacks getting drafted and their coaches getting fired either that same year or the year right after. It happens a lot in the NFL.
And last year with Caleb Williams was the one that made the least sense. Everybody looked at that and said, why is Matt Eberflus going to be the head coach for Caleb Williams?
He should have been fired before Caleb Williams.
Right. Yeah, they should have known, like, hey, we got the number 1 pick. We're taking Caleb Williams. Let's go get somebody who's an offensive mind who can develop this quarterback. And no, we'll stick with Eberflus, who had, I mean, they weren't the worst team in the league the year they had the number 1 pick because they made the trade with the Panthers, but the year before they were, and they still weren't very good the year after. So that one made no sense. I think it makes sense to give Brian Callahan a chance here. He is supposed to be a quarterback guru.
Yep.
He's worked with a number 1 overall pick before in Joe Burrow, and I'm willing to give him a fair chance this year to develop Cam Ward, but like we said, the quarterback is going to get blamed last. Like Anthony Richardson right now, I think it's pretty fair to say that he's probably not going to be a very good NFL quarterback, but everybody else is going to take a fall before Anthony Richardson, except for Chris Ballard, apparently.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, either the quarterback is going to get blamed last, or he's got to be so bad where you're like, okay, yeah,
we messed up.
It may not matter who the coach is with this guy.
I think at this point, Chris Ballard and Anthony Richardson are tied together. If Richardson is not the guy, barring Daniel Jones being an MVP candidate this year, I think Chris Ballard's 9 lives are about to run out in Indianapolis too.
615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll take your thoughts on Brian Callahan and the Titans. Already some rolling in on the text line, which we will get to coming up next. Keep them coming, 615-737-1025. This week's Nashville's best deal is Red's Hot Chicken. Red's Hot Chicken on West End. Bring in the heat. Don't miss their hot chicken and waffles or the mac and cheese crunch wrap, which just sounds awesome. Grab a $30 gift card for only $15 while supplies last at theGameNashville.com/deals. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Join us tomorrow morning as we broadcast live at the Duncan grand reopening in Hermitage at 5205 Old Hickory Boulevard. Starting at 8 o'clock, the first 100 people in line will win free coffee for 100 days. Plus 1025 The Game will have your chance for tickets to an upcoming Nashville concert as well. That's at Duncan tomorrow. Myself, along with Paul Kuharski, will be out there. Robby and Rexrode brought to you by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get it all. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Taking your thoughts on the Titans and Brian Callahan. Weston Clarksville on the text line says, I still think they should have let the new GM decide the fate on Callahan. Should have let Borgonzi pick his coach, because at the end of the year, if things are bad, he can say, sorry, I didn't pick that coach. Matt from Camden says, if they do end up firing Callahan this season, I want him to go hire someone with some head coaching experience. I do not want to do the hot coordinator thing again. This is from Matt from Camden. It is funny how the pendulum swings in terms of what people are looking for when it comes to head coaches.
Yeah, and most of the good head coaches lately have been the hot coordinator. Like, you don't see a ton of retreads going and having success. Like, Dan Quinn had a great first year in Washington. That would be the example. But just before that, Washington hired Ron Rivera, and it was a disaster.
Yep.
So I would, and like Mike McCarthy with Dallas was not very good. I would say hot coordinator is still the way to go, but I think it's you need to swing the pendulum back a little bit towards what Mike Vrabel was. They went from, well, Mike Vrabel's, salty and sarcastic, so let's go with the nice guy in Brian Callahan. I think you need something a little bit in the middle.
Gino says, if this was Madden franchise mode, I just sim this next season and look to see what coaches are available. That's how disinterested I am, and it sucks. Optimism or faith, whatever you want to call it, I don't have any of it. This is from Gino on the text line. I understand it, and it's been a rough go for Titans fans around here.
The Titans have the number one pick playing quarterback for them this year. Last year I totally would have understood that of, Will Levis, as much hype as there was around Will Levis, he wasn't the number one pick in the draft.
And there were plenty of people that did not like Will Levis around here heading into last year.
Right. Even if you don't think the Titans are going to be good this year, which I don't think they're going to be good this year, there's at least a reason to watch this year because you have the number one overall pick playing quarterback for you. That's enough to get me to turn the TV on at the very least.
Well, yeah, look, but to that point, as things stand right now, that's about the only thing I'm excited to watch for the Tennessee Titans.
100%.
Yeah, it's about it.
I do say if this was Madden franchise mode, I might sim defense and not watch that part.
Yeah.
Like I'll watch Cam Ward play and then, mute the TV when the defense comes on.
I guess to that point, the other thing I could be excited about is do the Titans as a team reach 16 sacks this year? Can they get a sack per game? Because my goodness, I don't know who's going to get it.
I mean,
now looking at the roster.
If you went just with the edge rushers, I wonder what the over-under on edge rusher sacks would be for the Titans this year with
very good.
Jones, Key, Oladejo, and the other group of middling pass rushers they have there. I bet it would be low double digits.
It's not going to be
not very high.
Really, this whole discussion, I think this is one of those things. Sometimes it's pretty black and white heading into a year, right? Sometimes with a head coach, man, if he doesn't make the playoffs this year, he's probably out. Or if they don't get to the divisional round this year or the conference championship, this guy could be out. I don't know if it's that simple with the Titans. I'm with you. I don't know that the record matters that much in this, rather than what does the process look like with Cam Ward. Now, I also hear people that say, well, if things are going well enough with Cam Ward and you feel like he's making significant progress throughout the year, then that should reflect in your record at the end of it. And I do agree with that to some degree. If you're getting good quarterback play, that should affect your record. And I mean, think about last year's team. Last year's Titans roster, not very good. Now, this year's Titans roster, also not very good. But think about how many more games they would have won last year had they gotten league average quarterback play. I mean, I could think of at least 2, maybe 3. So they're not a playoff team or anything like that, but you're talking about probably 6 wins instead of 3. So this year, if Cam Ward is a league average quarterback it's hard. I guess what I'm saying is it's hard for me to imagine them seeing everything they want to see out of Cam Ward and the progress that they want to see from Brian Callahan to Cam Ward, and this team going 3-14 again. It's hard for me to get there that would be the case unless the defense is just a total sieve and they can't stop anybody out there.
I just think you can't set an arbitrary win number and say, if Brian Callahan doesn't win 8 games this year, he's got to be gone.
That I agree with.
I think there could be a 6-11 season if you're competitive. Like, there's a difference between a 6-11 season where every time you play a good team, you get blown out, or a 6-11 season where, man, Cam Ward, he's beaten the teams he should. He's competitive against the teams that are playoff teams, but, the team's just not good enough to win some of those games yet. There's a difference between that 6-11 and maybe you beat the Saints, the Browns, you win a couple division games and then get blown out by everybody else. I think there's no just random win number that you could put and say Brian Callahan needs to win this many games. You can't just box score watch on this season. You got to see the progress from Cam Ward. And if at the end of the year you're seeing Cam Ward play some of his best football November, December, and it looks like he is truly seeing the game slow down, then I think you have to give Brian Callahan some props and at least give him another season.
Well, to that point, you mentioned being competitive. Obviously 3-14 is not very competitive, but in that 3-14, they had 7 games last year where they lost by 10 or more points.
Right.
That's hard to do in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to just get blasted every week in the NFL. And so if that's the case again, then I think your decision's made for you.
Right.
Like the Titans roster needs a lot of work. You look at edge rusher right now and it's not very encouraging. And, if L'Jarius Sneed either can't play due to injury or can't play due to legal situations, the defense could be really bad. Like it could be very bad this year. Offensively, I hope they fix the offensive line. I think I'm probably with most Titans fans that just say, I'll believe it when I see it, that they fix the offensive line.
Be better, right?
I'm looking at wide receiver, and it's Calvin Ridley and then a bunch of guys like Tyler Lockett is 33 in September. He's not going to be anywhere close to the same Tyler Lockett that he was in Seattle in the prime of his career. Now, could he give you 49 catches for 600 yards, which is what he gave Seattle last year? I'd sign up for that right now if I were the Titans. That's fine. I'm excited about Io Manor. I'm excited about Gunnar Helm, but you're talking about rookies and you're talking about, 4th round rookies at that.
Right.
So how much is realistic to expect from those guys? So it's a long way of me saying there's still a ton of holes on the roster, but if you're just getting destroyed every week and you lose 7 games again this year by 10 or more points,
then there's no question.
Then I think that tells you all you need to know about the coach.
I think the first 2 games, they're not going to decide Callahan's fate, but I think it's going to give you a decent idea of what this team is going to be. And it's funny, we had people texting me and Connor on the text line a couple weeks ago saying that the Titans should bench Cam Ward for the first 2 games because the Broncos and Rams are hard opponents, which is just absolutely ridiculous to me.
I would not do that.
But I think you're going to learn a lot from those first 2 games because those Broncos and Rams, those are not only playoff teams from last year, but they're playoff teams that I think universally are expected to be better this year.
Yep.
And if you get blown out in Denver, come home and get blown out by the Rams, I think you're going to start to see the gears start going and the wheels going to start to roll on Callahan possibly being fired. But even if you start 0-2 in those games and Cam Ward's got you with a chance to go win the game in the last 2 minutes and maybe comes up just short, or you give up a touchdown at the end to lose it, then I think there's a big difference there. Watching those first 2 games and seeing how Cam Ward performs and seeing how Brian Callahan looks in his second year as the head coach and play caller, I think is going to give you at least a sneak peek at what this season's going to be.
Couple more thoughts I want to get to on the Brian Callahan front. We'll do that coming up next. Plus, we will get back into the Predators and the NHL draft. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Get out of that summer heat for craft brews, food, games, and entertainment at the 2025 Nashville Predators Craft Beer Festival, which is this Saturday at Bridgestone Arena. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com/events. I have been to that. It's always a fun time.
It sounds great.
And, frankly, with how hot it's been this week, not a bad place to go on
That is
Saturday.
true. That
Make
is a
sure
good
you
point.
go check that out. 615-737-1025. Speaking of the Predators, we will get back into the Predators and some thoughts on the NHL draft here in just a few minutes. A couple other things I want to get to on the Callahan front, though, that I think are going to be really interesting. How different is the offense this year? Or maybe more accurately, how much more of the offense are we able to see this year? Because I think, Jake, we hit a point last year where it became pretty clear pretty early that, number one, the offensive line could not really hold up in pass protection. So some of those deeper concepts, routes that you want to run down the field, maybe with a guy like Ridley, you couldn't do a lot of, because if you did, Will Levis was going to end up on his back. And then, two, as the season went on, as the first game went on, it became more and more clear that you really could not trust Will Levis with his decision-making. And there's a lot that went into that. I think some of it was just not seeing what you need to see with the defense. Some of it was, I think, a little bit of panic at times in the pocket and not having a great pocket presence, which hopefully Cam Ward has more of this year. So, a lot of things went wrong last year. I didn't really walk away having a great feel for exactly how Brian Callahan did as a play caller and exactly what his offense, when running at full capacity, could look like, because there were so many deficiencies offensively that I think it was hard to get a real good gauge for it. We'll see if that's any better this year. I mean, I'm with you. The offense, there's no excuse for the offensive line to not be better this year. I'm not saying it's got to be top 10 in the league, but there's no excuse with the investment level that they've got in that thing. You go out, you get Dan Moore, you've got Bill Callahan in year 2, Latham moving to the right side, which is where he played in college. There's no excuse for that offensive line to not be significantly better than it was a year ago. If it's not, you got a big problem, and that by itself is probably enough to fire the coach and the whole staff at that point. But then the question becomes, all right, let's say the offensive line is better. Well, how much better is Cam Ward as a rookie? Is he doing a good job of diagnosing what he sees out there defensively? What's his pocket presence look like in the NFL? There is a big difference between the NFL and college football and what you're seeing, what you're dealing with. So all that still is a big question mark to me. And if you get improvements on both of those things, how does that affect Brian Callahan as a play caller? How does that affect what we see offensively from him? Because I never thought we got a great answer to that last year.
Yeah, Brian Callahan, he was limited by his personnel for sure. I don't think he was able to call the offense that in an ideal world he would like to. And you're right. It should be better this year. The offensive line, you look at the investment that they've made at all of those spots. $20 million a year in Dan Moore, 11th overall pick on Skoronski. Was it the highest paid center?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll see when he's back.
If Cushenberry's healthy. Zeitler is a former All-Pro and the 7th overall pick on Latham. You can't really invest all that much more in the offensive line than the Titans have. So if it's not better, then the evaluation has to be questioned of why are we spending so much of our resources on bad players on the offensive line. Cam Ward, you're right. We don't know what he's going to look like against NFL defenses, but you would think that the panic issues that Will Levis had won't be an issue for Cam Ward. That's the one thing that most scouts would say is that dude's always calm back there. So I don't think you'll have to worry about that. I think we will get a better idea of what Brian Callahan can do as a play caller, at least in my mind. And I don't feel like I saw a whole lot of complaints about Brian Callahan's play calling last year.
No, the people were too busy complaining about everything with the Titans last year, focusing on the play call.
There was way more problems than the play calling last year. But I think this year, if the offensive line is better, if Cam Ward is the guy that they hope he is, that is going to be the next piece that we start to look at is, can Brian Callahan be an effective play caller while being an effective head coach? Because it is tough to do both of those things. And we did see that be a problem at times where it felt like Brian Callahan was a little bit treading water when it came to being a head coach in his first year while trying to be a play caller. Hopefully that slows down for him in year 2, and we'll see what he can do as a play caller. But that is going to be a storyline this year. If the offensive line is improved, what can Brian Callahan do when his quarterback actually has time to throw?
So we brought up the NHL draft earlier, and Scott Wheeler was on with DVD yesterday and had some interesting comments about Porter Martone, James Higgins, and kind of what he was hearing there. And in his mock draft, the last mock draft that he did, he had the Predators taking Porter Martone, the winger, at number 5. Wheeler has come out with a piece this morning at The Athletic, and it's not a mock draft, but it is kind of the latest of what he's hearing the day before the draft. And I'll just read to you the little part about James Higgins. It says, a little more than a year ago, Higgins set the U18 World Singles Tournament points record with 22 in just 7 games in Finland and entered the summer before his draft year as the front runner to be the number 1 pick. Now I'm starting to get the sense that he's not going to be a top 5 pick. As things stand right now, I don't think the Sharks, Blackhawks, or Mammoth take him at 2, 3, or 4. And while I think he makes a lot of sense for the Preds at number 5, and I would take him there, they've shown a lot of interest in Martone throughout this year, and I think he's likely their selection if he's there. If Martone goes before the Preds pick at number 5, which is a real possibility, I could see Nashville circle back to Higgins. But the chalk version that I've got in my head right now has Higgins going number 6 or number 7 to the Flyers or the Bruins. That's the latest from Scott Wheeler this morning. So what do you make of that when you hear that?
It's interesting. I mean, it is crazy to think that James Higgins, even when the draft lottery happened, it felt like he was the 3rd guy behind Schaefer and Misa. And now that's changed. And he's now, it feels kind of safe to say he is going to be there for the Preds at 5. I think it has to be a large gap between Martone and Higgins for the Predators to take Martone. And if that is what they do, then clearly Barry Trotz likes Martone a lot. But also, if Martone's not there and they take Higgins, is Higgins really that far down on their draft board?
Right.
There's a lot of questions that come from that of if the gap does have to be big to go winger over center, how big is the gap if you take Higgins as soon as Martone comes off the board?
I mean, look, if you want to take Barry Trotz 100% at his word, what he said the other day, here's the couple things that I walked away with. He brought up a couple of times how he thinks basically prospects 3 through 8 are pretty similar.
Yeah.
Not in terms of the way that they play, but the talent level, all that. And he also said that his preference would be to draft a centerman over a winger. So if you're just going purely off that, it's hard to imagine them drafting Porter Martone. Like if you believe that he thinks that most of those prospects 3 through 8 are similar and that he would rather have a center than a winger, then that doesn't seem like that adds up to Porter Martone to me. Wheeler's also just not making stuff up. Like Wheeler has clearly heard that the Predators really like Porter Martone. I think one thing that's got to be factored into all this, and you could ask this question from the Trotz point of view, and you could ask it the question as to like what exactly Wheeler is being told and by who. How much gamesmanship is going on with all this, with being, a couple days out from the draft when Wheeler heard some of this stuff, and now in this case, 1 day out from the NHL draft.
It does feel like there is some sort of smokescreen being played here, whether that's what the Preds are saying outwardly or what they're telling insiders like Scott Wheeler. It is a little bit confusing, and I'm wondering if maybe Barry Trotz thinks that Porter Martone isn't going to be there at 5.
Oh, and he may not be,
because that seems like the most likely scenario is that they want to take a center and they don't think Martone's going to be there at 5, so they will take a center. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting that I think we all know who's going number 1. I'd be really surprised if it's not Schaefer, the defenseman, at number 1. It's interesting that Wheeler says he doesn't think the Sharks, Blackhawks, or Mammoth are taking Higgins at 2, 3, or 4. What about Martone? That would be my question. Because, and look, we keep talking about Martone and Higgins. Nobody knows that that's who the Predators are boiling it down to. They may be saying, yeah, y'all go ahead and take Porter Martone or James Higgins because we really like Brady Martin, and that's who we're taking. That's our guy, and Brady Martin's our pick. I have no idea. I have no clue.
we're not going to
they're
know
looking at here.
until the Preds make the pick tomorrow night. Which,
Exactly.
And I'm wondering, that I think the easy takeaway when Barry Trotz says 3 through 8 in the terms of those prospects is that you guess Schaefer and Misa are 1 and 2. Maybe he's putting Martone in that group, and like Misa would be in the 3 through 8. I don't know. I guess we won't find out until tomorrow.
615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll go rapid fire next. Couple of your thoughts to get to on the Titans and the Preds. Keep them coming. 615-737-1025. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get it all. Live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Taking your thoughts on the Titans and the Preds on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We've talked a lot today about Porter Martone and James Hagans and who the Predators could draft at number 5. We have not brought up Roger McQueen a whole lot, who we have talked about on this show before. It looks like he's probably going to be more in like that 8 to 12 kind of range. But Wes from Hermitage wondering if Lightning McQueen is worth the hype in this draft.
Draft him immediately. It's the greatest movie in history, Robby.
It's a great film. There's no doubt about that. To answer the question, I don't know. He's 6'5". The size is great. The skill level is really good. I'm not going to sit here and act like I've watched Roger McQueen play a ton of hockey, but I have seen some, and I understand the fascination with him. The back injury, I think, scares some people, which is why he is slotted where he is in the draft process. Had he been completely healthy, there are some that think he would be in the conversation to be the number 1 overall pick. There are some that think that even if he's completely healthy, his game's inconsistent enough to the point where he'd still be probably in the same range he is right now. So I guess that question really just depends on who you ask when it comes to Roger McQueen.
Right. I would just be excited, just like Connor, to have Lightning McQueen in Nashville. I can already imagine Max Hers letting out a mean ka-chow after a goal.
He's got to wear 95 if he gets here, though.
Yeah, that is true.
He has to.
That's a good point.
Yeah. No, that'd be good. Just for the goal call from Max. I think he would kill a ka-chow if it was Roger McQueen. But I do think, again, I said this on Monday or Tuesday, based on what I've seen, that is the nightmare scenario for Preds fans. It doesn't seem like they have to worry about that. I
don't think he's going to be in the fold.
Right. There hasn't been a whole lot of smoke about him being in the conversation at number 5. So I think Preds fans can sleep easily tonight knowing that Lightning will not be coming to Nashville.
One texter says, Preds draft thought, is there a scenario you would trade down 2 or 3 spots? For me, if Schaefer, Misa, Frondell, and Hagans are all gone, I'd be willing to trade down for the right package. Philly and Boston are reported to like the same players. By the same vein, if Pittsburgh wanted to trade up, would you be willing to do that for the right package that includes 11 and 12? I would find that tempting with the thought of taking, McQueen kind of in that mix as well. To answer the question, I would not do that. Like, top 5 picks don't grow on trees, and I would just, if the situation comes up where Schaefer, Misa, Frondell, and Hagans are all gone, well, then I would probably just take either Denoyer or Martone at that point would be the way that I would go.
And if you're trading back, unless you're getting an NHL player in that trade, which you wouldn't get a significant NHL player to move back from 5 to 10, you're just picking up more draft assets. And the Preds really don't need more draft assets. So I think you just stick and pick at 5.
I think they will stick and pick at 5. Now we've also had the question of, can they move up? It's not totally impossible. We are kind of running out of time for that. I mean, the draft is tomorrow. So, most of the time these deals don't come together on the draft floor, which by the way, they're not at this year.
While they're on the clock.
Yeah, they're all decentralized. So, I mean, these conversations I'm sure have been going on for a while. I mean, look, Barry Trotz said that people are trying to move around and there's just not a whole lot of willingness to listen right now in the top 5. So does that change between now and the draft tomorrow? Maybe. I mean, my guess is they're picking at 5 and they're going to pick at 5 and we'll see who it ends up being. Like, the bigger question is, are they going to be picking later in the first round? Are they going to use both of those picks? Are they going to try to package those as a trade? We're seeing some trades rolling in the NHL. Buffalo made another one with Utah last night. I think it was Ken Holland, who is the general manager in LA, who said yesterday that he thinks it could get pretty busy here in the next couple of days. So does that happen? I mean, Evander Kane got traded from the Oilers to the Canucks yesterday. So over the next 24 to 48 hours, are there a ton of trades around the league? If so, do the Predators get involved in that? Like, there's a lot that can, I think, will happen between now and by the time Saturday rolls around and the second part of that draft commences.
This is going to be a very interesting 36 hours, 48 hours for the Predators, because like we said, I don't think there's any reason you trade out of 5, but 23 and 26, Alex Daugherty seemed to be of the mindset that they will make those picks. I'm
less of that mindset.
Yeah, I think that they could end up wheeling and dealing those for something. So it'll be interesting. Lots of big moves to be made for the Preds.
Drew on the Titans front says, I know I'm optimistic to a fault and definitely don't want to get my hopes up. I think the Titans are going to be okay. I don't expect a Super Bowl win, but I do see them winning games and being an above 500 team. I believe the GM is going to build a better team than we think. I also believe if our management and owner don't ruin Cam Ward, then we'll make all of these games super competitive. Drew says, I know you guys are talking about hockey, but you guys' pessimism of my boys is rubbing me the wrong way. Well, long term, we'll see. I think this team this year being an over 500 team is a very lofty goal for the Tennessee Titans. It's not impossible. We've seen teams the last 2 years come out of nowhere and be over 500, and in Washington's case, get to the NFC title game last year. So it's not impossible, but it is lofty.
Things could change, and you could have players step up that you weren't expecting a ton from, which makes you a better team.
I mean, who knows? Maybe Femi Oladejo is Javon Kirsch reincarnated,
right? And maybe Gunnar Helm is George Kittle, but the way I don't see 9 wins on this schedule right now. Jared had the whole thing with Barry Trotz about, are you playing for 2026 or 2029 with the Preds? I think the Titans are playing for 2027. Like that's 2027. They want to be towards the top of the AFC when that new stadium opens. So that is what they're building toward. That's why you draft a project like Femi Oladejo in the second round. That's why you draft a guy who maybe slipped in Winston in the third round because of an injury. You're not building to be winning the AFC South this year. You're looking to win the AFC South in 2027.
I would agree with that. And I think based on where their roster is, it's hard to do anything really but that at this point. Like, we'll see if they fix the offensive line. My guess is, and we'll see what Io Manor and DK bring to the table, but my guess is they're probably still another piece or two away at wide receiver that's going to come later in the draft, either next year or the year after that. That's going to be 5 years from now. If Cam Ward works out, will be Cam Ward's primary pass catcher. Will be somebody that's probably not on the roster yet, if I had to guess. No disrespect to Io Manor or DK. We'll see.
You need to spend early round picks on wide receiver, pass rusher, and cornerback in the next couple of years.
Correct.
And then maybe the team starts to look a little bit different.
Correct. Jake, it's been fun this week, man.
It's been
Appreciate
a great
you
week.
having us in.
Yeah, excited to fill in. I hope you enjoy PK tomorrow.
PK will be with me tomorrow. We're going to be out at Duncan in Hermitage for the grand reopening of that. And remember, starting at 8 o'clock, the first 100 people that are in line for that will have free coffee for 100 days. Plus, we're going to have your chances to win tickets to an upcoming concert as well. So PK and I will be out at Duncan at 5205 Old Hickory Boulevard tomorrow morning. So looking forward to seeing you out there. That does it for us today. Chasing Big Joe is coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.